my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Thank you very much for all of you to come. Professor Jerry Solfwin has been associated with us a very long time. Since 2002 I know him, and we have had so many conversations about meditation, the way to knowledge it, the way to learn. He has a degree in sociology, yes, and social sciences, and then he does research in parapsychology. He's very, very well known in the field actually, and he has had meditation classes through UMass Dartmouth running for elderly people for several years, and we have quite a bit of interest because of yoga and meditation and consciousness, those kind of studies, and learning about knowledge itself. And Jerry actually had been teaching a class that I used to teach at UMass, the science of Kriya Yoga, and then now he has been teaching for the last 2 years. So he has quite a bit of publication, very well known in the field, and we are very privileged to have him. He was a seminar coordinator at UMass, still is. And so I'm very glad that he is here, and he's going to be talking about something that is so dear to his heart. And even though the last time we had discussed about, he was going to talk about stress, meditation and mind, but now he included parapsychology. This will be of interest, you know, the parapsychology is something that we don't really understand. Many times it's just an academic term. Something related to psychology, but I think Jerry has quite a bit of information, and we will be able to relate some of it, I think, in this discussion. So, without any further ado, I would request Jerry, and we welcome him.
Yeah, so regarding the title, I will be when I gave you the renewed title, which you see here, I was trying to bite off more than I could chew. And so when I actually finalized the preparation...
Excuse me, can you stand there?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
This help?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I prefer to stand, if that's all right with everyone. Do I need to move this up?
No, that's okay.
Oh. So, there's actually quite a bit there in that title, for me personally. And so when I actually finalized the preparations in the past couple of days, I realized I had to cut it down. So there will actually be a lot more about stress management, Professor Singh, as the original title had. And not so much about parapsychology.
I guess you got this stressed out, and then finally decided to have this stress management.
Yes, I was a bit stressed. Yes. So the remembrances, speculations, and future prospects is all still correct. In any case, let me begin by welcoming you. I'm speaking on a topic that I've spoke on a number of times, but I'm going to speak on it in a very different way than I've ever done before. And I hope that this will be useful and interesting to you, to all of you, because there's part of stress management in meditation and yoga that I've never talked about before in a seminar. I do in my classes with my students, but never in a seminar like this one. And let's see how it plays out. I'd like to start by talking about the gift of yoga. Oh, excuse me, I need to get my notes out so I'll know what's coming up next. And I have those still here. And I should get my glasses. Which is actually part of the talk. In a minor but significant way. It's my belief that one of India's great gifts to the world, and at the UMass Dartmouth seminar series, we feature India's gifts to the world, and that's so many things, from food to politics to society to mathematics to spirituality, of course, but so many other things. But I personally believe that one of the greatest gifts is in the gift of yoga. And when I speak of yoga, it's a very broad topic in India, of course, but the yoga I'm talking about is more specifically Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And so this gift is a gift that keeps giving. And there's been a boom in the USA in interest in yoga, meditation, which are part and parcel of the same. We start off by talking about why there's that boom. Because there are so many people for so many years that have been interested in yoga. And there are so many different reasons to be interested in yoga. Many people have gone to India, many Americans have gone to India in search of a guru, in search of an ashram, in search of answers to questions about who they are, their personal development, life and death, the big questions of life. And there are other reasons for yoga being important and people getting involved with yoga. There are health reasons, from diet to physical exercise, etc. There are cultural reasons that people get involved with yoga. But none of those are the reason that we have this in the United States right now. And we are indeed in an accelerating boom period as far as yoga and meditation are concerned. And the reason is because America is the stress capital of the world. I don't have one of my charts. I have a number of charts that show the international polling. The international polls, which are many corporations and many organizations do polling on an international level as well as national level. And it's not just about Republicans and Democrats, of course. In any case, America typically, for many, many years now, comes up number one, head and tails above everybody else in the world, on the planet. There's no other society on the planet that has the stress levels that we have in the United States of America. Now, we're not going to go into the reasons for that, that's part of speculations. And perhaps you all have your own ideas about those reasons, and perhaps they overlap with each other. Perhaps you all have a feeling for that. But what we're going to ask about, or why I bring that up, and I do have one chart to show you. Why I bring that up is because that's why there's a boom in yoga interest in yoga and meditation and Indian philosophy in general. It's because of the stress in America. Because here are charts that show the mean stress scores, and this is for men and women, the men in blue and the women in red. And you'll see from 1983 to 2006 to 2009, it's going up for both men and women. Broken down by age, you have the same thing with the possible exception of the 65 and up age group, who are more or less level, but everybody else is increasing. Well, there's some trends here from 2006 to 2009. We see drops in the less than 25 age group, and that might be interesting from a sociological point of view, but the general pattern is still there. By race, by income, this is an interesting one. Many people think the stress is related to income. It's not. Employment, there is a little bit of a relationship here. Education, all going up, going up, going up from the period of 1983 to 2009. And we expect it to continue because it's been going up for quite some time, and it already is higher than any place on the planet. That's why there's a boom in interest in yoga, because yoga is a natural stress management technique. So, in a minute I want to talk about it, but I'd like to see if I can play one. Raj, I might need your help on this. I want to play one little YouTube video to illustrate what I'm talking about, just a couple of minutes. Dan Harris is, are we going to be able to play a YouTube video that I have embedded in here? You don't have to, oh, you should, here, right there. You going to be able to play it? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's go back before playing. Okay, so the Wi-Fi is fast enough to play. It's a YouTube video. It's online. So I'll tell you what. Let me go back, do an introduction, and then we'll try it. Okay. All right. So, I don't know how many of you know Dan Harris. Dan Harris has been a news anchor. He's the weekend anchor for NBC National News. And Dan Harris has been there in that position for a long time. And he studied under some of the well-known newscasters of 20, 25 years ago. In any case, he had a panic attack on air. Let me see if I can get that back up. A few years ago, he had a full-blown panic attack in the middle of a broadcast while he was reading the news. He describes that. He has a number of YouTube videos where he describes that in detail, and actually has clips of it that I guess that's part of his family photos. In any case, as a result of that experience, he was advised by his doctor and by his boss at NBC to investigate some means of stress management that would work for him. And he ended up doing a special on meditation in America, partly for his own therapy, so he could learn about meditation and what it was. He was a changed man after doing that special. because it got him involved with an area that he had always thought was no place he would ever want to go. And the result was, he's now, just last year, about a year or two ago, he wrote a book and published his book on the 10% happier. And he does it because he has become convinced that there's something very, very special about meditation. Using it as a stress management procedure as he did, and as many people do, he's getting even more than just the stress management that he looks for. So now we're ready for it. So we should be able to just there should be. Yeah, if you just double, it should be able to bring it back. If not, that's all right. We can skip it. So this is connected to Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah, but Wi-Fi is not very strong.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what Professor Singh told me, so I just thought I'd see if we could try it. If not, it's okay. The reason I like to show it is because it's a very powerful 3-minute video that I have of him, where he articulates how personally impressed and changed he was as a result of going through a meditation process, and now he does it regularly, and he wouldn't think about anything else, and he's become a salesman for America for selling meditation, realizing that still a large number of Americans still think of it as crazy if you use the word meditation. They want nothing to do with it. No, don't bother us. Let's just go back to it. Yeah. So I don't want to fuss with that. Yeah. Just go back to the problem. Or oh, you got it? Fantastic. Yep. And the sound connected. It hasn't moved yet. I see it's still 0, 0.
Yeah, it's buffering actually.
There it is. You don't have to do full screen. Just do it that way.
Wi-Fi is very weak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems to be running. And I wouldn't bother trying to put full screen, then just puts an additional thing on. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Oh, in any case, I encourage you in your spare time to go to YouTube and type in Dan Harris meditation. But he's such a good presenter that it's worthwhile. The point of having him in there is just to show you that this is a general trend, and he talks about that in the 3 minutes. He said, this stuff is every place now. He said it used to be crazy. It used to be, some little corner someplace, somebody would have a sign up for meditation or yoga, but now it has swept the nation, and he said he's predicting that is the future. He said this is the big thing of the future. We're just at the early part of it, he said. In any case, I wanted to point that out because it links this idea of stress in America with the idea of meditation, yoga, Eastern philosophy. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about stress. What is stress? Well, we all know what stress is. What happens when your body is aroused? So here's a little few steps to talk about the nature of stress. I think I've got my things out of order here, but that's okay. We'll move on with that the way they are. Let's start here. Stress. How stress affects your health. One of the negative parts of stress is that there are some serious health consequences for stress. And so the reason for the increased visibility of meditation and yoga in America is because doctors have picked it up. Every medical center, every major medical center in the country has some sort of alternative complementary medicine center. And of all the different kinds of alternative and complementary medicine, acupuncture, herbals, various kinds of diet programs, various kinds of alternative treatments, such as homeopathy, chiropractic in some cases even. In any case, of all them, the number one treatment that is agreed upon by the Nurses Association, and all of the Nurses Associations in America, and by most doctors, is meditation. It's the one that is known to be effective in many, many kinds of illness. So, how does stress affect your health? Well, stress starts with arousal of your body when you are stressed. And that causes the sympathetic nervous system to kick in. Your heart begins to pound. Respiration increases. You get a queasy feeling in your stomach. And stress hormones rush into your bloodstream. Okay? Now, all of these happen when you feel threatened. And the idea is that this is the original fight or flight response that's built into us. It's not because I'm a scary guy, or it's not because I'm not used to this and I get scared easily, or I'm easily aroused. No, everybody has this. It's built in. We're programmed to have stress when we're threatened. It's an evolutionary adaptation that is human, very human. It's in animals as well. But humans have this so-called fight or flight response when we feel threatened. Now, the threat we're talking about is when you walk down the stairs and step out into the street, a tiger is going to jump at you. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. But it turns out that the body doesn't know the difference between the tiger jumping at you and your boss shouting at you and saying, "You're fired, I've had enough of you." So it responds the same way. That is, we have an app inside us, evolutionarily. An app, an iPhone app. And when we're threatened by anything, the app gets pushed. The hypothalamus starts the process. It notifies the pituitary, "Hey, get going, we've got a threat." And the pituitary then signals the adrenals to start pumping out the acetylcholine into your bloodstream immediately. And it goes, there's more to it than that, but that's the basic HPA process that starts the thing off, okay? And that's what's called your sympathetic nervous system kicking in. And that's what causes all these symptoms, the adrenaline and norepinephrine, etc. Okay? So the stress activates any perceived threat will activate the sympathetic nervous system, the HPA cycle. Looks like this. And the adrenals, of course, down here on the kidneys. Okay? So, Walter Cannon, physiologist at Harvard University many years ago, was the first one to describe in detail and write about the fight or flight response. And the body is preparing, he said, when threatened, and it's universal, to automatically fight like hell or run like hell. And you indeed do get extremely fast and strong for that moment. Okay, so what's wrong with that? Well, there's nothing wrong with that. But after Walter Cannon discussed this, Hans Selye, a very interesting man in science, by the way, Hans Selye was a doctor, he was also a researcher, and he held actually a number of different positions in his career. He spent part of his life in Canada and part here in America. He's from Eastern Europe, actually, originally. He described, amongst his many studies, the general adaptation syndrome, and that is that that you get pumped up, and then there comes a time that it's limited. Your arousal, the strength, the ability to run is limited in time, and so then it has to come down one way or another. And that general adaptation system will bring it down in a natural way if the threat is taken away. But what happens if the threat stays there? Well, it turns out that in America, the threat stays there. We find that even though this little cycle goes on, it doesn't ever relax because we have to go to work the next day. We have to deal with the people that we didn't like or perceived as a threat the next day. We have to deal with things over and over and over again. And so the problem is that the cycle doesn't ever really stop. And that's where the health difficulties come in. So stress has a tremendous deleterious effect on our health. And it has it in this way. We call them psychophysiological disorders, and there's a whole bunch of them, including cardiovascular stuff, like I have, hypertension, heart disease, gastrointestinal stuff, irritable bowel syndrome, for example, respiratory stuff, asthma, allergies, musculoskeletal, low back pain, tension headaches, skin, acne, eczema, psoriasis, etc. This is just a sample. Some of the more prominent ones that we're mostly familiar with that are due to stress. Now, how does the stress cause these? Does it cause it directly? And the answer is no. It does it via the immune system. That is, the stress starts to eat away at the immune system. And the immune system has been studied under psychoneuroimmunology. It's a relatively new field of science, relatively new field, maybe 30 years or something like that. Psychoneuroimmunology is about psycho, and that's me, I'm a psycho. And neuro means my brain and brain cells. And immunology is my immunological system in my body. And so the three of those interact. My psycho part is the part that gets fearful, okay? That experiences a threat. whether there is one there or not. Okay? Now that's a whole story in itself, because it turns out that we create our own stresses in our mind. Okay? But we don't have time to go there, because I have other places to go first of all. Okay? So, psychoneuroimmunology studies the relationships here, and the basic idea is that stress does not cause illness directly, but stress, depression, emotional arousal, and that means positive and negative emotion. Okay? So, your greatest celebration, when you won the tournament, when you getting married, having a celebration, it's your birthday, you got a promotion, you made $1 million, whatever. All those are also stress. And they have the same effect as the other side of losing all your money or losing your partner or death of the family, etc. So stress, depression, emotional arousal of any sort, and other mood states deplete the immune system. Okay. So what does that mean is we have immunosuppression. For example, two of the major diseases that you've heard of, AIDS, AIDS, is acquired immune deficiency syndrome. Okay? HIV, human immunodeficiency virus. Okay, these two are a couple of prominent ones that actually have the terms immunodeficiency in them. But there are many other conditions and diseases. So this is the bad part of stress, right? So how do we deal with it? And now we go into the big part. How do we deal with the stress? And now we start to look at yoga meditation, okay? A little history of stress management, and this part is parts you may not know. There are parts you do know, but I think there are parts you don't know. Turns out that we have a packaged stress management process and procedure in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and elsewhere in the Vedas, but particularly in here. That's one of the reasons that our tremendous stress levels in America have attracted yoga and meditation processes into America. And it's increasing as stress increases. So the Yoga Sutras are an early example of basically stress management. It's how to deal with stress. Right. But from a Western point of view, we look at stress and we go back to about the time of Ivan Pavlov. Now, Ivan Pavlov is the Russian physiologist who was famous for his work with dogs salivating. Pavlov's dogs. Very famous because it's the basis of conditioning, called classical conditioning. So he basically discovered that his dogs salivate a lot. Dog. Anybody who's ever had or seen or been with a dog, what? That's science? I could have told you that. Dogs salivate a lot. Okay, but what he discovered was that when he brought the food in, they would salivate from the sound of the door as he was walking in. They would salivate before they got the smell of the food into their nose. Sometimes he would walk in ahead of time without the food. They would salivate because he walks in the door. So, as most brilliant advances in science, this is my opinion here, most brilliant advances in science are simply common sense knowledge everybody knows. Everybody knows this about dogs salivating, and everybody knows that, well, of course, you come in advance, the dog's going to salivate ahead of time. it was Pavlov and the genius of Pavlov that realized there was something meaningful here. So there have been hundreds of people, thousands probably, for hundreds or thousands of years before Pavlov, who all saw the same thing. But nobody said, hey, this means something. And it was Pavlov that did. Okay? Another example, I think of the guy who, you know, you walk through a field out here in Dartmouth, or and you get all these sticky things all over your pants, and you say, and you end up after the hike picking them off. Well, everybody knows that experience, but it was one guy who said, hey, maybe we can use this, and he invented Velcro. He took a look, a microscope, he said, doggone, how do they do that? And he made Velcro. And he made how many millions of dollars with that? In any case, it's this idea of having an insight about something that's totally ordinary and right in front of everybody else. Pavlov had that with his dogs, and he invented classical conditioning. He didn't invent it, that's a joke. He didn't invent it, he observed it and named it and talked about how it works. Okay, classical conditioning of Pavlov's dogs. So that's what we begin our talk on stress management, because in fact what we're talking with stress management is being able to control something that's physical in your body. Controlling your emotions, controlling your movement, your behavior, controlling your visceral part, and particularly as we move along in this, your automatic parts. Think fear, flight response. Okay, that's an automatic part. Okay, can we control that? Yeah, and that's the point. But we didn't know that as a group. Some people did and wrote about it, but as a group, it wasn't a part of our common knowledge that you could affect or think about or control the fight or flight response. Okay? Because it deals with a visceral response that's automatic that we're born with. And how can you control that, right? Well, it turns out that Pavlov's is the beginning of stress management from that point of view. Okay, next, his discovery of classical conditioning with his dogs led a number of psychologists, John Watson, Mary Cover-Jones, and Joseph Wolpe, to say, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder if people get phobias that way by classical conditioning. That is, if you go to a restaurant, all right, and you have bad food because they didn't pick up the order at the fish market quick enough and it's kind of rotten, but they served it anyway, and in the middle of the meal you get a bad feeling in your stomach, and you start to get a pain, and you start vomiting, and then they have to drag you home, and you're sick for another day. Well, every time you pass by that restaurant after that, you're going to say, no. Now, they only had the bad food once. They cleaned it up and it's gone. The restaurant's fine now. But still, no. As a matter of fact, you're probably just driving by the restaurant, not even thinking of eating, will start to get a little queasy. That's classical conditioning, and it's called phobia. You develop phobias that way. A lot of phobias. Fear of dogs, fear of heights, fear of being in a closed space, like claustrophobia, fear of the color blue, fear, that's called cyanophobia, by the way. The fears of almost anything. There are lists in psychology of thousands of things that people fear. How did they develop those fears? Probably a lot of them classical conditioning. It was the coincidental pairing of something negative that affected you deeply with the color blue. Okay? And so, ever after you look at the color blue and you say, oh no, terrible. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the basic idea. And these people, John Watson, Mary Cupboard Jones, and Joseph Wolpe, took it to the next step. And they said, gosh, if you could develop a phobia from classical conditioning, could you get rid of one too? And the answer is yes. You get rid of a phobia the same way. And they developed, the last two, Mary Cupboard Jones and Joseph Wolpe, developed a technique called systematic desensitization based on classical conditioning, simple classical conditioning, that they could set it up so that you are not any longer afraid of or have fear of the color blue or whatever it is that you're trying to work on. Okay, so that's the basic, the beginning of it. Along comes E.L. Thorndike and B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner is the most well-known, for many years a professor of psychology at Harvard University. Very famous because he controlled the field of research psychology. I say controlled across the entire America. You couldn't. His theory was called behaviorism, and it's based on conditioning. That is, everything we do, think, say, feel is conditioned. Period. That's it. Life is being conditioned. And he did a lot of really interesting experiments to show that. But his conditioning was different than Pavlov's. Pavlov looked at what's called classical conditioning, and Skinner and Thorndike looked at what's called operant conditioning or instrumental conditioning. That is, they would set up a series of circumstances by which the conditioning would occur according to how they wanted it to be. Okay, so I'm pointing this out because this is the beginning of this idea that you can actually control things in your body. You can take control of your feelings, your behaviors, your thoughts even. You can control these. How? Using classical or operant conditioning techniques. And that's what they thought yoga and meditation were. Very good classical and or operant conditioning techniques. But we're going to jump forward a little bit. The main result we want to pick from this is we now know from this and the many other workers who are involved with classical and operant conditioning study, it is now possible and widely accepted by psychologists at least, and most scientists, I think, I mean, back then even, it now became accepted that you could condition those parts of your nervous system and behavior, thoughts, and feelings that were formerly thought to be totally automatic. Okay. Something that in the Vedas is just everyday stuff. But it took a while to actually show it from a scientific point of view. So I'm going to jump forward now to the 1960s, and I'll start with a personal story here. In the 1960s, in 1961, I was a undergraduate student at North Adams State College in the northwestern corner of the state, this state. And North Adams is right next to Williams College. And while I was there, which was only one semester, I just spent one semester there. But during that semester, I had a life-changing experience. Not as a result of anything I learned in my courses, any of my mathematics. You know, I did. I or starting some mathematics, but I never had to study with that. But in any case, there was a seminar like this one. And the seminar was given by a retired physics professor from Williams College, whose name I do not remember. I've been trying to dig it up, actually, because it has historical interest, which I'll point out in a minute. The professor had a seminar, and the main key word in it was supersensory perception. What's that? I didn't know. So I went. And I sat and I listened to this professor, and he outlined what I now see years later. It was years before I learned that what he was talking about was the basis of biofeedback. Now, biofeedback didn't come into popular use, the term didn't come into use, there wasn't any accepted agreement until the late 1960s. This is 1961, and this physics professor said that he had a group of his academic friends, and he had decided that they were going to have a project to do something for themselves with their intellect, with their knowledge, that they should be able to improve human life. So they had meetings, and they decided on health as being the thing that they would improve, and they decided that they would start working on a theory about how we get problems. So one of the first problems they dealt with was this one, eyeglasses. I see we have one gentleman there with eyeglasses on, two gentlemen, and the others, I presume, like me, wear them for reading, have glasses for other purposes. Well, they said, well, this is a pretty widespread problem, so they looked into it with their academic background. From an academic scientific point of view, they said, well, what causes that? So they got a lot of publications out, they had meetings, and they decided that they came up with a theory that, in fact, it was stress. And it was stress that was causing, because they realized that the ones who had the worst problem, that had earliest onset amongst their group, were the ones who did the most reading and spent the most time in dark corners of the library, poring over books instead of being out into the sun playing basketball or baseball or running in the fields. And so they put two together and they developed this theory, and they called it supersensory perception. And they said, like Mary Cover Jones and Joseph Volpe, they said, well, if you can get a disease, like an eye condition, by this, by stress, you can reverse it also by the same principles. And that's what they did. And so he was a man, I'm 73. He was about my age when he spoke to me in 1961 as an undergraduate. I was, what, 19 years old or something like that. And he spoke and said that he had thrown away his glasses. He had worn glasses all of his life, and that for about 20 years before that event, that seminar, when he started the procedure of reversing his eye problems, he before that, he was progressively worse. Every time he went to his eye doctor, there'd be a thicker lens until he had Coke bottle bottoms. In any case, he started reversing it. He said it took a long time. He said it took maybe 10 to 20 years. But now, at the age of, he was in his early 70s, so 70 to 73, in my current age now. And he said he had thrown away his glasses. And he did use glasses from time to time, have them to read, but they were a much smaller prescription, like these. These are just magnifying. They just magnify them. And there's no prescription in them. In any case, so he outlined that process, and I, as an undergraduate student, had been reading a lot. My eyes were getting tense. I didn't have a headache, but I could feel it in my eye. And that was the main thing that he said. He said that when you strain your eyes, when you try to read, in low light situations, you're doing this, you know? You're actually forcing your muscles to be used when they don't need to be used. You should put on a better light, and then you can relax and watch that. He said, but when you try to read or look at something else, photographs or whatever, in the light that's insufficient, then it forces you to kind of do that stuff. And he said, you do it over and over and over, and your body learns to do that. And he said, well, with time, if you focus on it mentally, and say you can reverse the process by the same process. Okay? And so that's the basis of it. And I look back at it and say, my God, that was in 1961. And that was about 8 years before Neil Miller at the Rockefeller Institute did the crucial experiment that once and for all proved biofeedback. It was the same year, 1969, that the Biofeedback Society was founded. And it was approved for doing therapy and using biofeedback therapy techniques. And biofeedback basically is a technique of hooking yourself up, or a patient up, to electronic equipment that will listen to your body. So it's usually a muscular thing. So for example, if I want to do biofeedback for relaxation, I would put electrodes on my frontalis muscle, very good one to work with actually, and then I would relax. I would take some deep breaths, I would meditate a little, I might stretch my body a little, but I attempt to relax. I would try to get rid of the thoughts in my mind that were distracting or stressful. If there was something on my mind that was stressing me during that period of time, like the bill I didn't pay, I would say, well, I'll pay it tomorrow, you know, and I would put it out of my mind for the moment that I'm doing this relaxation. And then the equipment would actually have a meter or a sound device, possibly a visual display, that would tell me how much tension was in my frontalis muscle at any given moment. So as I'm doing it, I can watch the meter, I can watch the needle, listen to the sound, and I can say, okay, it's working. And that encourages me, and so I keep doing more of whatever I'm doing to make it go down, and it works. So you do that for a few minutes, and then you have a couple of those sessions per week for a couple of weeks, and that's it. It trains you to relax yourself, to be able to take control of something in your body that you need to take control of. And that's the basic idea of biofeedback. Now, for years, people have known about this possibility, but no one had ever been able to prove in a tightly and carefully conducted experiment that it was possible. The reason? Because if you put the electrodes on me in my frontalis and you say, okay, Jerry, relax, I will then think about being in Hawaii, and I'll imagine being on a beach, and my imagination is sufficient to lower my blood pressure, to relax my muscles. I can feel the warmth of the sun, I'll close my eyes, etc. But that's not biofeedback. That's imagination. I don't need the electrodes to do that. Do you see the point? The point is, biofeedback was trying to establish that the actual feedback itself, the actual tone or sound that you were getting back from your own body, was the crucial element that helped you to control it. Well, they had difficulty finding an experiment that would do that. Neil Miller did. He's a very well-known psychologist, by the way. And Miller used curized rats, or mice, I'm not sure which. I think mice, actually. Curare is the substance that will, actually, they use it in surgery. Anybody ever had surgery with curare? I had a friend who recently was having some surgical procedure done, and they used curare. He said it was the scariest thing he had ever found.
That's a poison, right?
Yeah, in curare, you lose all your ability to have any sort of control over any part of your body whatsoever. Okay? You can hear, you can receive, you can see, you can feel, and you want to tell the doctor, hey, I itch down here, please scratch me, but you can't. You can't speak, you can't move your jaw, you can't move your mouth, you can't move your eyes, you can't move your arms, you can't write. So it's a scary experience. But in graduate school in psychology, sometimes, I never did it, but some of the other students did experience this experience of curare. But you have to be under very well supervised because you freak out. In any case, he did that with mice. I don't know. And that way, he was sure it was the actual tone. It was the tone that he used. It was a musical tone. And the mice were rewarded if the tone decreased. The tone was driven by their heart rate. So if the tone decreased, he would give them a reward. I think it was a pleasure stimulation in the brain reward, which is very effective. But in any case, he would give them a reward, and hopefully they could do it again. And they did. The mice were able to then lower the sound some more and lower the sound some more. And the only way they could do that was by lowering their heartbeat. And so it was a kind of a brilliant experiment in that sense, because other people had tried for years to find an experiment that would be kind of solid and tight. In any case, the side story here is that Dr. Miller was fascinated by reports before this experiment about the Indian yogi masters and Japanese Zen masters who could voluntarily control their pulse, blood pressure, and metabolic rate, their body functions that physiologists at that time had long considered to be completely involuntary. So that's where we go with stress management. We start now to open up the doors to understand we have control of stuff in our body that allows us to unstress. Okay, so we're going to wait on that one. Okay. So that's basically the history of stress management in a very short, my own history, drawing on Western sources, Western science sources. Now, the next step comes with, I'm going to go back to this one, with this. Why is yoga so effective? Why is yoga so effective? And the answer lies here. Ashtanga yoga is 8 things. It's not just one thing. You see the sign, yoga tonight at 10 o'clock, all right? And you go there and you bring your mat, you wear your leotard, and you expect to do some stretching movement. Well, yoga is a lot more than that, and that's the problem. The problem in America is that we perceive yoga to be some stretching exercises. End of story. Well, it's not the end of the story. It's not even the beginning of the story. So let me give an example. My neighbor Julie I was out walking my dog a couple of weeks ago. This happened, and I passed by Julie, so we stopped and chatted. And Julie said to me, and she says, "Oh, Jerry, I'm so stressed. I'm really, really stressed, you know. And boy, you know," I asked her how she is, how you doing, and oh, she's really stressed. So I said, "Well, Julie, you know about meditation, right?" And she said, "Oh yeah, I tried that. Doesn't work for me." Common answer. Now, I've been teaching meditation and researching meditation for years. So I have lots of friends who, who come up to me, say, I'm stressed, what can I do? And I say, what about meditation? And that's their answer. It's a very common thing. They say, oh, I tried it, doesn't work. Oh, I could never meditate. I'm too active. So I told her this. I said, Julie, do you know that in India, there are 3 things that make meditation, okay? I first said, yoga and meditation in India are the same. First of all, don't make a distinction between meditation and yoga. So if she was talking meditation, she was thinking of sitting in a lotus position, sitting, contemplating her navel, or whatever she was going to contemplate. That's what she was thinking of as meditation, okay? And that's what she can't do. So I said, well, wait a minute, there are 3 things that make up yoga or meditation. And I said, the 3 things are some kind of physical activity. And look at you, you're out here walking today. You're walking, I'm walking my dog, and she's taking a hike, get a little exercise. And she gardens all the time. She spends lots of time in her garden. I said, Julie, you already do that. You have a regular physical exercise routine, and that is part of meditation. That's part of yoga. She said, yeah, but wait, that's not yoga. I said, yes. It's a physical activity, and it's how you do it that matters. If you do it mindfully, it becomes yoga. Oh, okay. She said, what are the other 2 parts? I said, the other part is breathing, some kind of breathing technique that you focus on your breathing. You be aware of your breathing. And I said, are you aware of your breathing right now? She said, yeah, I'm kind of breathing hard after walking. I said, well, just continue focusing on that as you're walking home. She said, that's all? And I said, yep, that's all. Just attend to your breath. Pay attention to your breath. Okay? Do I have to change it? No. Just attend to your breath. What's the 3rd part? Part 3 is your mind. What are you focused on? And Julie, I knew you for years, and you were one of the most focused people I know. When you have a particular thing you want to do outdoors, you want to plant something over there, you gather everything together, and you head over to the place, you get the tools, you get it all together, and you are totally focused on that activity. That's the part about the mind. Your mind is focused, attentive, okay? And I said, yes, there are ways that you can actually increase and improve if you have a guru, if you have a group, there's more that you can know about this that will help you. But you already do meditation if you'd only wake up and see it. And she said, oh, well, thank you. She said, you've just changed my day. In any case, I do believe that about meditation, about yoga. First of all, there are 8 things involved. Yama, niyama. I presume everybody here is familiar with them? No, okay. The pranayama is the first part, okay? So this part I didn't tell her. The yama niyama is kind of the first steps. It's cleanliness, things to do and not to do, basically. They're pretty basic. But asana is your movement part, and that's the part that in America we focus on in terms of yoga at the YMCA at 10 p.m. That's the asana. Pranayama is the breathing part, and the rest I think of as the mind. Okay? Starting with pratyahara, where you withdraw your mind from your senses, and moving on to dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, all deeper levels of contemplative practice. Now, contemplative practice is very, very big in America these days. And in fact, what you'll find is some people in publications, in the research journals, they'll use the word contemplative practice instead of meditation. In other words, they'll be studying meditation, but instead of restricting it to just one kind of form, to generalize it, they will talk about the contemplative practice and the effects that has on one's behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. Okay, so those are the 8 things, and this is why, in my humble opinion, because it's never been shown in research, I'm not sure how you could do this, actually. It'd be very difficult to do, be very costly, but I'm convinced that you could do it. But that's the answer to the question I raised before. Why is yoga so effective? Because it's a multi-level approach. It includes a lot of other things besides just sitting meditating, okay? In the very unitary sense. All of those are good things, but so these are the 3 things, and those are the 3 things I talked to Julie about in the general way that I just told her. Okay, so the final piece I want to get to here, how are we doing on time?
We're speaking for an hour.
So, go to what? About 3/4 an hour. 45 minutes? Or a half hour?
Maybe 15 minutes, so that there is some questions.
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, let's do about 15 minutes. Okay, the final piece I want to move into is the part that I've mentioned over and over, but haven't specifically talked to about much, and that's meditation. Meditation. So we've been talking about meditation, but we haven't talked about it, have we? Mindfulness. So meditation is now called mindfulness, contemplative practice. There are a number of other terms, but mainly mindfulness and contemplative practice are the ones that are widely used in research journals for research purposes. When people study some form of meditation, they talk about that. There are hundreds and thousands of forms of meditation. My mentor in meditation, and here's where we kind of touch a little bit on the parapsychology. Years ago, I became interested in, when I was at Duke University, the parapsychology laboratory, I was interested in a topic that wasn't being investigated at the time by anybody in our laboratory, and that was healing. Because a number of people that I knew had experiences with various kinds of charismatic healers, or psychic healers, so-called psychic healers, or laying on of hands healers. Now in North Carolina, of course, it's part of the Bible Belt, and there's a large fundamental Christian community, and many of the groups and churches actually had some form of healing service. So if you had a cold, or if you had, a surgical procedure that you needed, or you had cancer or something, they would say, okay, well, come here and we'll do a healing for you. So I was interested in that particular phenomenon. And so I started doing some studies with it. In any case, I'm not sure I want to go too far with that. So yeah, maybe I'll kind of skip over that. The reason I mentioned it was because I did have one friend in parapsychology. He's a medical psychologist. His name is Lawrence Lashan. And Lawrence Lashan was in New York City. And so when I talked to him, I knew him from conferences and from papers that he had written and things so we had communication already. And so when Larry was, when I told Larry, I said, Larry, I'm interested in healing. That was his specialty. And so I said, so he said, oh, then you must become a healer. So he said, I have a technique, and I'll come down and I'll train you and your group to be healers, using a meditation healing technique. So in other cases, so then he did, and he became my guru, my mentor for meditation. I learned a lot from him about meditation and mindfulness. One of the things I learned was that there are so many forms of meditation, and that you're different than me. Everyone's different. And so I might be an active person. You might, like to sit and be quiet and contemplative more often than I do. Or your body type might be different than mine. Okay. Well, might it be that you need or desire or could use a different kind of meditation? That is it true that there's one kind of meditation that fits everybody? Lashan was very clear on that. He said, no way. As a medical psychologist, he said, meditation is unique. So if a person wants to meditate, they need to look through the various kinds of meditation and find one that fits them. Don't worry about what their brother did or what their friend does. Find one that fits them. Okay? And that made sense to me. So he wrote a book called, it's a very well-known book. It sold a lot of copies. It's called How to Meditate. And you can still buy it. He wrote it originally in the early 1970s. And he's made numerous recopies of that. In any case, it was a very successful book. And in it, he guides the reader to many different forms of meditation. He said, here, try this for 2 weeks, try this one for 2 weeks, try that for 2 weeks, then find the one that works for you. Okay, so that was my mentor in meditation. But what is meditation? More recently, I've become quite fascinated because of my research interests. Larry Lashan was interested in research also, and he did some research, but not a whole lot. So his idea, his theory about meditation was never fully tested. Now, along comes John Kabat-Zinn, who's interested in Buddhism. He's at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, or was. He's pretty much retired now. But he's not as old as I am, but he retired early. Good for him. In any case, John Kabat-Zinn was developed because of his interest in Buddhism. He was interested in what's called Vipassana meditation, mindfulness meditation. That's what the English cognate is. And so he wondered at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, he wondered if the patients he was seeing, meaning cancer patients and other patients who were having some sort of operation and experiencing pain, if this meditation, his Vipassana, his mindfulness meditation, could in fact help them in some way. And so he conducted some experiments, and then he stimulated a whole lot of research. So we have an abundance of research in meditation these days, and it's in large part due to this guy. Well, I don't have his name up there, John Kabat-Zinn, because he was so active and so felt it was so urgent that we needed to do research on these things. Okay, so one of the things he had to do, which is very rare, is come up, except if you're in research. If you're in research, you have to come up with a definition. How do you define meditation? Hard. And I mean, you can make some general statements, kind of talk about this or that, or some techniques, but that's not really a good definition from a scientific research point of view. So John Kabat-Zinn had to come up with a definition that was useful for research, but secondly, also was simple enough and comprehensive enough that it would really cover the whole field. he was interested in Buddhism, but he didn't want to talk just about Buddhism or Buddhist forms or just Vipassana. So he came up with this idea for mindfulness, and he described it this way. Mindfulness is a special way of paying attention. Now, this I'm totally in agreement with. I did studies with meditation back when I was at Duke University. My partner, Bill Roll, and I, he was the director of our foundation, and he and I were both interested in meditation and its effect on psychic experiences. If there was any effect on psychic experiences, people experiencing more telepathy, more clairvoyance, more precognition, more synchronicity in their life. In any case, we designed and conducted a long series of studies with a TM-like meditation. We called it Eno meditation. And the meditation, how many of you are familiar with the relaxation response? Relaxation response from Herbert Benson. Herbert Benson is a cardiologist at Harvard Medical School, Harvard Beth Israel complex, and he's a key player in the research on meditation in America. In any case, he did the original studies with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. The original studies of transcendental meditation, TM, were conducted by him and Keith Wallace. Keith Wallace is now, I guess he still is president of Maharishi University. So Keith Wallace was in physiology, a physiologist at Harvard Medical School, Harvard Beth Israel. And so he and Herb Benson used to share a laboratory, and they'd bump into one another from time to time because they were doing their own individual projects. And so one day, Keith came up to Herb and said, "Hey, I'm doing some studies with meditation. You know what that is?" And so that's what started the conversation. And they proceeded for a couple of years to produce a whole bunch of studies on meditation and the effects of meditation, which were very profound, which really opened the door. They just blew open the ceiling on the scientific view of in America of meditation, and it stimulated virtually. It was the original research that stimulated. It was so well done. It was so well done, so carefully controlled. And the findings were very fascinating. They worked with asthma patients. They worked with cardiology patients, which was Herb Benson's specialty. They worked with hypertensives. They worked with people who were having knee surgery. They worked with quite a range of patients. And in all cases, virtually all the cases, they found very strong positive benefits of meditation over the control group. And so it was a very important piece that was kind of put in place by Herb Benson. In any case, Herb Benson then went on and conducted some more experiments with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And as Herb told me, Maharishi thought he was his best buddy. He used to come over and say, "You just keep doing those experiments and I'm going to take care of you for the rest of your life." Well, that didn't happen. The reason was that Herb said, "Wait a minute, why do we need the Maharishi?" Herb said, "We have a nice procedure, call it meditation, contemplative practice, call it whatever you want, but it has some scientific grounding, it's definable, and it has benefits for a variety of patients." So he conducted some experiments without the Maharishi, without calling it TM, without calling it meditation, without any of the things that go along with making it secular. Non-secular, I mean. In any case, the result was he wrote a book called relaxation response, written by Herb Benson, nobody else. And in relaxation response, he described his experiments, and he was getting the same results that the TM people were getting. And he felt more comfortable about that as a scientist because it took away another variable that he didn't have to deal with. And he was getting the same kind of results. So in any case, that's another step. And he was conducting his experiments at the same time I was conducting mine at Duke. And so he had a meditation process or procedure that he called relaxation response, and it was a mantra meditation. A mantra meditation. And so that's what Bill Roll and I used at Duke. We copied it basically. We had a mantra meditation that we worked with and used the same timing and the same sorts of. But there was no Maharishi associated with it. In any case, we were interested in something else. Herb was interested in the medical benefits. We were interested in the psychological benefits, and particularly the psychic benefits. So we conducted a couple of years of experiments with that. So I think I have not a whole lot more to say about that because I want to get back to this. So in all that process, what I learned about meditation of the sort we're talking about here, what I learned about meditation is that there is an essence to it. And the essence is right there. John Kabat-Zinn hit the nail on the head, in my opinion. Attention, attention, attention. It's all about attention. If you can attend to something, if you can pay attention to something, anything.
That's what literally means, in Sanskrit, dhyana means attention.
Yeah.
That is what is meditation. So
Yes.
it's not
I'm
easy.
not familiar with Sanskrit terms, but yeah, right. So this is.
That was one of the things that you had listed in the 8. Number 7.
Yeah.
Eight steps.
So that was Pratyahara?
No.
Yeah.
Dhyana.
Oh,
Dhyana.
Dhyana. Yeah, Dhyana. Okay, great, thank you. Yeah. I'm not a Vedic scholar myself, as I hope you can realize. And so I kind of do my best, but I've been very influenced by the tremendous the input from the Vedas. As little of it as I have. So I want to kind of apologize for not being more deeply involved in that myself. But my own view of of meditation is that attention is the essence of it. And it's attention that John Kabat-Zinn says there are 3 things that go with it. It's a special way of paying attention. Not just paying attention, not just looking over because there's a sound over there or a flash of light, but you do it intentionally. Now, that's key because, as we saw, stress and stress management starts with what? Conditioning. Classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Now, we're conditioned from birth. We are full of conditioning. We very rarely do intentional things. We do things that are conditioned. We're conditioned to drive our cars. We're conditioned to go to a certain point at a certain time. Okay, I'll meet you for lunch. You know, it's all conditioning. It's all conditioning. We live a whole life, a very nice life. You can be happy. You know, you can get your PhD and go on and have a job and family and the whole thing. Okay, without ever thinking. All conditioning. All conditioning. Okay, so that's why that's important. Meditation is something different than conditioning. You're trying to transcend your conditioning. Be aware that you are conditioned if you don't take hold the spotlight of your attention yourself on purpose. Now, I want it. Give it to me. Okay. Number 2 is important in the present moment because we're always in the past and future, and there is no past. There is no future. All we got is it. We have now. And to be aware of that, to make yourself aware of it, and to make the other stuff go fuzzy on the sides is a great accomplishment. And perhaps the greatest one is this last one, non-judgmental. And I look to see that and here I'm very impressed with the societal tolerance in India. India, to me, is known, and one of its major characteristics is the tolerance. It's so hard to find, and yet it's the key to world peace. It's the key to individual peace. It's the key to so many things in life. This idea of non-judgmental, to look at something as it is.
Yeah.
And so in my meditation training with my medical psychologist guru, Larry Lasham, one of the things that we would do was to take a silly little object like a pen. He used a matchbook, but we don't use, he was a smoker like I was. And so he would take it like a book of matches, which were common back then, and just grab that and say, okay, that's your object of focus. Now look at that and see it as it is. Not what it does, not how it was made, not how it was constructed, not its composition, just see it as it is. And so we would spend hours and hours and hours just looking at a book of matches, touching it, feeling it, tasting it, trying to see it non-judgmentally. Okay, so I really like this, and I use it in my classes with my students. I tell all my students to do this at the beginning of the semester, and I encourage them. I can't enforce it, but I encourage them to do it throughout the semester. That it will help them in their grades and stuff. But this is a very good definition, in my opinion. I've been using it for some years, and I'm more and more impressed with it the more I use it. Okay? So I think I'm about done with it. I have a couple more names on the paper that I want to point out, just as a kind of a way to finish off here. And I'm looking forward to any questions you may have. Along the way, I've been influenced strongly by a couple of people. Michael Murphy is the founder of Esalen Institute on the West Coast in Big Sur, California. And they, for many years, have been kind of a what do you call them? A think tank for New Age thinking, but not the flaky stuff. There's some of that, but mostly academics, mostly people who were in academia, but who were kind of at one edge or another of their field of study, whether it be biology, whether it be psychology, a lot of psychologists, but also physicists, also chemists, and many other people. And Michael would invite them to come and present a seminar, to come and meet with other groups. He had other people come and live at the center for periods of time to help them if they were writing a book or something like that. So I was privileged to meet Michael, and I got to know him pretty well because we had a group that he sponsored. So a small group of us got together regularly at Esalen every year, at least once a year. And Michael wrote an excellent book, which is not very popular. I'm guessing none of you here heard of it. It's called Jacob Hadabet. Jacob Hadabet. And Jacob Adabet is what Michael called a speculative fiction. I'd never seen a book called speculative fiction before, but when you read the book, you realize why. So Michael envisioned a human being, a man named Jacob Adabet, that's his main character, who had developed the ability through his own meditation or contemplative practice. He has developed the ability to actually change his own body right to the DNA. He can actually make changes in his own body. It's a fascinating book, and it has to do with Michael's interest in contemplative practice and meditation. So Michael himself and a couple of partners got together a massive meditation library long before there was anything like that at the major universities. So Michael did that at Esalen. So I just want to mention that. He was an influence on me. Another influence was in biofeedback was Alice and Elmer Green. Now some of you may know those names. They were founders of the biofeedback movement in America, together with Neil Miller, and a few other people were also involved. But they were, I would say, the key people bringing the biofeedback together at the Manager Foundation. And some of you may know that the Manager Foundation, Elmer and Alice, brought Swami Rama to America when they had heard that they were referred to him because someone had met him, one of their colleagues had met him, and found that he was interested in coming to America to display his physiological abilities. So he had Swami Rama had a major input on the development of biofeedback in America because of what he did. So there's a whole story there. And Elmer and Alice wrote a book called Beyond Biofeedback. Beyond Biofeedback. And so that's a couple more that I want to mention. And the final one, no, I'm done. Okay, so basically, I thank you for being here. Thank you for putting up with my hastily put together seminar talk. I hope you got something worthwhile out of this. I wanted to kind of share a few ideas. The new part is the part about the stress benefit history that I laid out. That goes back to Pavlov, which is not new. Most people don't think about that as being part of the biofeedback movement. So I hope that's helpful to you to understand that, and helps you in your life to understand also about the idea of yoga, meditation, and how it might be helpful to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. That we really, well, it's very difficult to find a summary of psychology, science, and spirituality and philosophy. Very difficult. So there are people I've heard who just talk about this aspect or that aspect, and although Jerry did not bring this up, but he also is a practitioner, as you could see. So he also trains people in that case. I'm sure there are some questions you all may have or comments. Raj, you have a comment?
What I understand is that you said that classical conditioning and operant conditioning can modulate visceral response. That's true?
Yeah.
Okay, so can you give some example of that?
Yes, I can. If I can really clarify your question, a visceral response, that's what Pavlov worked with. The salivation would be one visceral response, but you mean something else?
Yeah, means in terms of human activity, what activity can modulate visceral response?
Right. Well, in terms of, if we bring it forward to biofeedback was concerned with the internal organs, heart, for example, heart rate, and the muscle. Those are visceral responses. In other words, a visceral response to a threat is the fight or flight response, the sympathetic nervous system kicking in, and with the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal cycle, and that's a chemical, biochemical.
But these are the autonomic response, so they already respond. But how we can regulate those?
How detailed?
How we can regulate those response?
Yeah.
So I am saying that these conditionings modulate visceral response.
Yes.
But how we can, means as a human being, we can what activity we should do so that we can modulate those.
Right. Okay. So the answer is meditation, and that's that's the other part. In other words, the most widely recommended stress management procedure is meditation.
Okay. So
in the broadest sense.
So in addition to this, that my the second question,
Yes.
the trauma also create a stress.
Yeah.
So how you can modulate visceral response to reduce the trauma?
Okay. Let me make a slight technical correction in how you stated that, Raj, but because the trauma does not cause stress. Stress is caused up here. And that's one thing that psychology, modern psychology, now understands. Years ago it was thought there's a stressor, the light turns red, you're in a hurry, that's what causes stress. No, wrong. What causes stress is how you respond to external environmental conditions. So for one person, they would say, oh cool, I can sit and relax for a minute. Light's red. Another person will say, "Argh." So, and it's all up here. So now we understand that stress comes from here, from your mind, if you want to, think of it as larger than just here. Stress is in your mind. And so we talk about how stressors give different results for different people and under what circumstances. And that's a major area for study in psychology and stress management both. So I worked, for example, with a group, I did stress management training when I was on the West Coast, and I worked with a group of air traffic controllers. These people who sit at highly stressful jobs because they sit there hour after hour after hour after hour with nothing to do. And then suddenly, there's an emergency. There's something amiss because it's a very routine job, except when something funny happens, and then suddenly you have to open up all your senses and you have to put everything to work for you. And so it's a kind of a crazy situation. And the people who do that do it not for the money, but because they like the stress. So you tend to recruit people who are stress junkies, which is another thing that is studied by psychologists. There are people who avoid stress, and there are people who seek it out, who go climb mountains, not to see the scenery, but because they like the rush it gives them when they're standing on the edge of a cliff with the potential of their falling. So that's another visceral response. Actually, that's a very good example of a visceral response. And so the question is how to control that, and that's the one you asked, and it would be individual. And was each individual, so if you, for example, want to stress management for a particular issue, you would sit down with a team or with a stress management trainer, and they would ask you a lot of questions, find out who you are, what kind of person you are, why the stressor creates the stress it does in your mind, and work from there individually. And so they may work differently with Ishvar than with you. And so it'd be all very individual. There are some general principles, and the general principles are what I talked about up here, about the stress management and the yoga, and how yoga is beneficial because it's a multi-aspected approach to handling or managing stress.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thanks for your talk, by the way. Good question. According to you, what you would consider as a state of meditation? I mean, you may start closing your eyes, but when you would consider someone is in the state of meditation or deep meditation?
Yeah. When I would consider the start of it?
No. What you will consider the state of meditation?
Right.
So someone says, I am meditating.
Yeah.
He might have just closed his eyes.
Right.
Right? So what you would, according to you,
Yeah.
would be the final state of meditation
Yeah.
or the deep state of meditation?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. Thank you for that. I've had a lot of meditation experiences, as anybody would who's meditated for some years. But when I had a stroke a dozen years ago, and after the stroke, my meditation changed. And it's been very, very hard. I haven't been able to have the same experiences I had before my stroke. I'm not sure what that means. And I've talked to a neuropsychologist about it at the medical center, specifically about that. But what it means to me, or what it used to mean to me, was being in a flow. In psychology today, we talk about being in a flow. As a matter of fact, this book called Flow, it was very popular, it was a #1 bestseller for many years. Little paperback thing by a psychologist. It's about the psychology of happiness, and he found that people are happy when they're in a flow. And he defined flow as being like a meditation state, being focused on something. And it was usually a simple task, like doing some artwork for recreational purposes, knitting, working on a car, doing some mechanical things with your hand, doing something physical, and being totally focused on that, so that you didn't know how much time was going by. You were unaware of the time. That you, so it fits John Kabat-Zinn's definition beautifully, this idea of flow. That is, it's intentional. You're doing it because you want to do it, and you're going to focus on working on this car. It's non-judgmental. You're not making any judgments about anybody, anything. You are simply, and it's in the present moment. So that's what I would think about. I would think of flow, of the psychological concept of flow, as kind of a very high state for me that I would seek out. See, you get into a problem with it because if you seek it out, you won't get it. It's in meditation. My mentor always said, Larry LeShan, he always said, it's the experience of here I am, wasn't I? As soon, in any state of consciousness, but particularly meditation, if you say, oh, I'm here, you're gone. You're not there anymore. As soon as you, yeah, so the mind is funny like that.
When I'm reading a book and I'm totally immersed into it and I don't realize the time passing by, but I'm
Yeah,
judgmental
absolutely.
about the characters of the book, right? Would that be considered
it would make a little difference, but the concept you're saying is absolutely what flow talks about. That's what the concept of flow is all about, of being totally engaged in the activity. Reading a book, knitting, working in the car, playing a sport is another one.
Software programming. When you start coding something, the time just flies out.
Time flies.
You spend about 6 hours, 8 hours time.
Yeah, yeah.
J. Krishnamurti said, meditation occurs. You don't do the meditation.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you are talking. Whenever you are deeply into one particular thing that you are doing, for you, the period of time is lapsed. That much time is not there as far as you are concerned, for the others you are not aware. So meditation is the many times we are sitting and we just simply forget that whatever we have been doing or what we are looking to do, nothing. And you are there, and whenever you are all of a sudden wake up from the lapsed period, you realize that, oh, it has been 10 minutes that I don't know. That much time period has been gone out of your life.
The yogic literature describes the state of meditation is where you have complete withdrawal of all the senses. That means you're not, so there are only two worlds, not this world and that world. For a conscious mind, there are only two worlds, the world inside and world outside. There is only two divisions for anybody. We are just observer in this world, right? So there is inside world and there is an outside world. So when you are completely disconnected from the outside world, that means all your connection to the outside world through the five senses, which is called pratyahara, which is because you withdraw them and you are internally focused. And it's not just that, but you are in a such a huge state of happiness, bliss as you may call it, right? That you don't want to come out of it. So if you have not reached that, the presence of you, the ego still exists, with that, but it is in that non-judgmental, which is Shastra says, or the yogic wisdom says, it's called a sakshi bhava. So sakshi, you just become a witness. So, but you don't judge it. But you are just you are just witnessing that. But what you said is the samadhi part, which is the happening part.
The last portion.
The last portion.
Last portion is samadhi.
Samadhi that happens. You don't subdue the, but you start with the dhyanam, which is the meditation as you call it in modern terminology. But then you reach what is called samadhi that occurs or that happens to you. But you have to make that attempt, which is dhyanam, focus, attention.
That is what Krishnamurti's opinion, one way, but he also said so many places.
Right. But because
the practice does make difference.
Yes.
Obviously. But the point is to say, at that level, so to whom you call the meditator, and to whom you call your reason of meditation, the object of meditation, combines.
so that's where the yogic literature describes the samadhi in two parts. Nirvikalpa samadhi, savikalpa samadhi. So when you get into nirvikalpa samadhi, where the vikalpa or your vikalpa, I don't know what is the English term, option, but I don't think option is the correct term.
Alternative.
Yeah, but that's a very crude translation, I would say. So when you get into the nirvikalpa samadhi, where even the ego dissolves, where the witness doesn't exist, so that oneness, as we call it today, where oneness bhav comes, ekatmak bhav.
See, this is where Sankara's teachings comes in picture, what is called Atmagnana, Brahmagnana. We are all talking about the meditation, but Atma do not need the meditation. One who feels that I am incomplete, I need something more, is the one who needs the meditation. And that one is the Jiva Bhava. But your real being is not Jiva Bhava. Your real being is Atma Bhava. And Atma Tattva is a completeness, wholeness, fullness. And that is where, if you have some background of Atma Gnan, meditation does become very effective, very fast, very useful, every way possible. Because in all the talks Jerry is talking about, there is another higher level of which you are really longing for, looking for. In terms of, you can call happiness, but that happiness ultimately is you. You are the happiness. You are not longing for it. You are recognizing, you are unfolding. That is what the final goal of meditation is supposed to be. Because every human being, irrespective of caste, color, age, nationality, religion, no matter what, are looking for that, because they are ultimately dead. And that is what, whether you call TM or whatever, it is all subordinate. The main part is that you are that you are not dead. And that,
Yeah, that's the paradox.
that is where the, what we call Atma Gnana. There are books on it. Shankara wrote, Shankara wrote. And there is explanation, detailed explanation. But be clear that, like say right now I am talking and you are listening. In both cases, my Jiv Bhava is talking and your Jiv Bhava is listening. Your Atma Tattva, Atma level, neither I need to speak nor you need to listen. Because we are not two at that point. So the reason is not because it is this everything is fine. I am not questioning that this part is very detailed analysis. No question, and it's very useful. Because in fact, whenever you have a problem, your problem is rooted on the what is called body, mind, sense complex, and that's not you. All the medical things are only for the Prakriti, that is body, mind, sense complex, not for the Chaitanya, the business that you want. Business is immortal.
Right. Well, that's kind of like the here you are, weren't you idea.
So-
That right.
Yeah,
The thought itself. It also reminds me of quantum physics, with the observer effect. That when you try to make an observation, you are affecting what you
Shankara has a
observe.
book called Drashya Vivek.
Yeah.
Looking at person who is looking at
Yeah.
and the object at which they become one at one.
Right. Yeah.
Well, very, very good discussion. Maybe I should let me ask one question before. Because you said that they don't like to use meditation or yoga in research. The researchers like to use mindfulness or contemplative mind. Do you have any reason why?
Well, yeah, there are two. One is with research, with meditation, you want to be specific about what it is. In other words, you want it to be replicable. So, in other words, in the article, you want to say exactly what it is. You not just say they did TM, but actually give the procedure, how long it was, who's the instructor, how many people were present, all the details so that somebody could replicate the experiment. So you want to be detailed. The other side of it is that to use contemplative practice, you generalize the idea. You're not speaking of TM anymore. You're speaking of generalized contemplative practice, all forms of meditation, all forms of mental focus and attention, etc. So those are the two things I think of with respect to driving people to use the terms they use.
So they don't use meditation. Meditation will not be able to convey that message.
You mean the yoga will not do it, not the
No,
meditation.
no,
They
no.
are
I'm
using
just
it.
saying meditation, also yoga. They don't.
No.
They tend to use alternative words
Yes.
even though you kept saying meditation, this is the definition of meditation, but you written there mindfulness.
Right, exactly.
Because
So-
that's why you
so-
said researchers use that.
Yeah, all of John Kabat-Zinn's publications, all about mindfulness.
Yeah, but why not use meditation?
Right. I mean, not in his publications, and I think it's again, it's to be specific because meditation, there are so many different kinds of forms.
So probably the mindfulness.
What?
So
No,
is the mindfulness.
No, mindfulness is actually a narrower term, and what you're getting down now to. So if you say meditation, I mean, you could talk about, let's say, an Aikido master doing his thing with the swords. And that could be meditation. And a lot of people think of it. Okay, so there are many, many forms. So with mindfulness, you're narrowing it down.
Well, I understood from your example of car,
Yes,
fixing car, I mean, would that be mindfulness?
it would be flow.
So that would also, but you kept referring to that as meditation.
Yeah, well, again, mindfulness needs intentionality, so it's not fixing the car. In other words, I fix a car all the time, and I'm not always mindful. You know, when I'm doing it, I'm sometimes angry, you know, I'm rushing, oh, it's getting dark, all these other things going on. So I don't do it mindfully all the time.
Would that be
When I do
meditation?
mindfully is when I say, oh, I want to know that I'm breathing.
I know, but I'm just trying to distinguish between meditation and mindfulness.
Yeah.
So you can get angry and you're in rushing, that be meditation?
If I
That would
get
not be
angry?
meditation also.
No, being angry is okay in mindfulness or meditation. But
The reason I ask is,
Yeah.
Pushing him to the wall.
the reason I ask this question because, you know,
Yeah.
when I talked to Maureen Hall and I went to this contemplative mind practice society in Amherst, they say they don't use meditation because it gives a connotation of religion because it's used by Buddhists.
yeah, yeah.
So they don't want to use that
Yeah.
because it's used by Buddhists, not because it's the same definition. We just use different words. So the reason I ask this question is, I mean, it's great, like Ishwar Bhai said, you know, whatever we make progress towards, that's great. But you have to realize that it came from Buddhists,
Yeah.
and maybe they have a lot more.
Yeah.
And if you try to avoid it, maybe you would have only small portion of it.
You
And-
disconnect from the source. I think that's what happens by using the wrong terminology. What happens is that somebody has some terminology till date, so long the humanity has progressed, right? So it has some certain terminology, and that terminology is its own historicity. So it loses that historicity if I disconnect from one point and start using a different term for something else. Now it's a new term. Now how do I connect this with this?
Well, I mean, that
So
historicity
you
is-
borrow the idea,
Yeah.
but if you don't use the same terminology, say for example, yoga, word yoga was not used as word yoga, but an Indian exercise. Somebody had used it. So they know the word Indian, they know the word exercise. They wouldn't have explored on the word yoga
Yeah.
because it's an unknown entity. But when the yoga came to West, the word remained yoga.
Yeah.
And that allowed people to explore on that and make the journey to the source.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, if you don't use the original terms, you have this fear of losing the rich history behind
Yeah.
those practices, because now there is a disconnect between the two. Because you might say meditation, somebody might call dhyan, oh, there may be different. I'm talking about meditation. You know what I'm saying? So then
that is not, yeah, I
There's
think
problems
that's,
on the other side too, but my answer to your question, the simple answer is that there's no general principle. In other words, so one group will say, oh, we don't use that because it has religious connotation. Another group will say, no, it doesn't have religious
Yeah,
connotation.
it's
So there's no
there's a
general
diverse
principle.
view on.
Right.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah.